Okay, and let me bring up this screen. What I'd like to do first today is just take a look at two Gemaras, just to show you the subtlety about this law of Gineva Stas, of deceiving somebody, and the difference in halacha between when a person is deceiving themselves or when I'm actively deceiving them. So we had seen an example in the halacha about a scenario where the person thinks that I've done them a tremendous favor. And when the circumstances indicate that I've done them a tremendous favor when I really haven't, I'm obligated to point it out to them that I was going to do this anyway, so they shouldn't think that I've done them a huge favor, because it's wrong to generate a feeling of indebtedness when that indebtedness does not legitimately exist. So there's a Gemara in Maseches Chulin Daf Tzadi Daled Amud Aleph that really is the source for this halacha. Tanya, and let me just see, let me make sure you have, does everyone see my cursor where I'm pointing to the word Tanya? Haya Rebbe Meir Omer. So we have a brisa where Rebbe Meir says as follows: Al yisarhev adam lechavero lisod etzlo v'yodea bo she'eino soed. You should not pressure a person to become a guest in your home when you know in advance that he's not going to accept, for whatever reason. You know, you say to someone, "Oh, please come over." You already know that he has a prior obligation, but you want to make him feel like you'd love to have him over, when in reality you don't want to have him over. But you figure you can make yourself look good by inviting him. Okay? Velo yarbelo b'tikroves v'yodea bo she'eino mekabel. You shouldn't heap upon him offers to give him stuff when you know that he's not going to be able to accept. Okay? Velo yiftach lo chavuyos hamechuros lechenveni ele im kein hodio. And you should not open up a brand new barrel of wine for him that has already been sold to a reseller, to a retailer, that you had to open anyway, unless you tell him in advance, I don't want you to think that I'm opening it just for you. I had to open this anyway for a retailer that was coming by to buy, let's say, 3/4 of the barrel anyway. So I had to open it anyway, so I might as well give you from the fresh one. Velo yomar lo soch shemen mipach rekan. And you're not allowed to tell him, here, please anoint yourself from an empty container. In other words, you offer him some oil, some fragrant oil, when you know that the container is empty, because you feel that he's going to refuse anyway. But you just want to go through the nicety of offering it to him, even when there's nothing in there. So this all involves a certain level of deception. However, v'im bishvil kevodo mutar. But if you're doing it in order to honor him, because you really want to show him that he's an important person, then it's going to be okay. Let me just see over here. Okay. Rashi over here says, "V'im bishvil kevodo shel oreach lahodia librios shechavivu alav." If you're doing it in order to express to him that he is precious to you, and like the again, I believe that the way that Rashi's learning over here is that it's only in the last case that if you are offering him oil to anoint himself, and the container is empty, he says if you're doing it because you wish to honor him as your guest, if you know that he's going to refuse, it would be permitted because you're doing it to show him honor. So let's say you actually don't have any fragrant oil in your house, but you know that this guest is deserving of the fragrant oil, so then it's permitted to offer it to him even when the container is empty. So the Gemara's then question is about this whole concept of gnevas das, about deceiving a person. Eini, is this really so? V'ha'ula ikla lebei Rav Yehuda, pasach lo chavuyos hamechuros lechenveni. What about the story about Ula, who came to Rav Yehuda, and Rav Yehuda opened up a new barrel of wine for him without telling him that he had to open it anyway for a retailer that was coming to purchase the wine? So the Gemara answers, Oduye Odoe. No, in that story, Rav Yehuda actually notified Ula, and he said, I have to open up some new barrels anyway. Please join me for some wine. V'iba Yasema, another answer could be, Shiny Ula de Chaviv le Rav Yehuda, de Belav Hachinami Pesuche Mifateach le. He says that Rav Yehuda, in that situation, was such a dear friend of Rav Yehuda, and he had such regard for him that even if he hadn't sold the barrel to a reseller, he would have opened a new barrel just for him. And so what you see from the Gemara over there is that because of the fact that Rav Yehuda would have opened a new barrel for him, even though he had to open it anyway, it's permitted to open up the barrel without saying anything. So in the case of the Gemara, unlike what we saw yesterday, it would not be necessary to disclose to the person that you had to open up the new barrel anyway, because even if I hadn't sold it, I would have opened it for you because I have such high regard for you. That when you come, like the example we gave yesterday, you're a special customer. I'll give you a special treatment, right? If it's actually true, so then it's okay. Then you don't have to disclose to him that you had been planning to open this barrel anyway for a larger customer coming by later today. So that's the first thing I wanted to show you, is that it all depends on the actual situation, which is why sometimes, a person who is engaged in business has to really ask himself honestly, am I telling the truth to this person? Am I being truthful to this person? And what the halacha requires of me to do is that even if I'm not saying anything, but the situation is misleading, I'm obligated to clarify the misleading situation, right? Unless there's nothing misleading. I would have opened it for him anyway. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted you to see. And then if we turn the page, there was, the Gemara goes through a number of different cases. The Gemara says, Kiha de Marzutra bereder Rav Nachman, haba ka'azil misicha lebei machuza. There was once a story of Marzutra, who was once traveling from the town of Sichra to the city of Bei Machuza. V'Rava v'Rav Safra havu ka'asi l'Sichra. And it just so happened by coincidence that Rava and Rav Safra had to travel to the town of Sichra. So they were traveling and they were coming from Machuza. So Marzutra's traveling from Sichra to Machuza, right? Rav and Rav Safra coming the other direction from Machuza to Sichra. So what happens? Pagu ahadadi. They meet each other in the middle, somewhere on the road, from the town to the city. So who saver la'apehu deka'asu? But Marzutra thought that these two rabbis had come out to greet him, to honor him by greeting him, because they had heard that he was coming to their city. So Amar lahu, lama lahu l'Rabbanan the taruach ba'asu kulei. So Marzutra said, why did you go through all that bother just to come out to greet me? You didn't have to come out to greet me. I'm very flattered that you did, but why did you have to bother yourselves over this? So Amarle Rav Safra, Anan lo hava yadi'inan de ka'asimar, I hava yadi'inan tevei hava tarchinan. So Rav Safra said back to him, to tell you the truth, Rebbe, we had no idea that you were coming to Machusa, right? We happened to need to travel to Sichra for some totally other reason. But if we would have known, we would have traveled even farther in order to greet you. So that was his response. So after the exchange was over, Amar le Rava, my taima amart lehachi da achlishte ledaite. So Rava turns to Rav Safra. Remember, they were traveling partners. Rav Safra told Mar Zutra the truth. He said, sorry, Rebbe, we didn't come out to greet you. So Rava turns to Rav Safra and he says, why did you have to tell him that? Like, why did you have to say anything? Because you made him feel bad. He thought that we were coming out to greet him and you told him the truth. Why did you could have just kept your mouth shut. So Amar lei, v'ha kamat inan lei. So Rav Safra says, I don't understand. That would have been deceptive. We would have been deceiving him. So Rava's response was, Ihu hu deka mate navshe. So the answer Rava said was, no, he was deceiving himself. There was nothing in our behavior that was that sort of indicated that we were coming out to greet him. He was the one who deceived himself by jumping to conclusions, to inappropriate conclusions. The fact that he saw us on the road when he was walking, he concluded that we were coming out to greet him. But there was nothing in our behavior that indicated that we were doing that. So therefore, we weren't deceiving him in any way. And since we weren't deceiving him in any way, there was no reason for us to have to clarify why we were traveling in his direction. So
Rabbi?
I just wanted to create a contrast between those two cases. In the case of the guy, the fellow who owns the wine, and he opens up the new barrel, he says that scenario is more indicative. It's extremely unlikely that a person would open up a new barrel for someone because by coincidence he happens to have to open it up anyway. And therefore, in the previous case, you have to announce it. You have to clarify, I'm not opening it up for you because it's reasonable for any person to conclude that he's opening up the barrel for me. Here, it wasn't reasonable for Mar Zutra to jump to the conclusion that they were coming out just to greet him. And therefore, Rava felt we didn't do anything that had the sort of appearance that we were doing something for him. And therefore, there was no reason for us to clarify it because we weren't doing anything that had a deceptive appearance. Go ahead, Dov. Did you want to say something?
Yeah. I was struggling with this the other day, and I'm still struggling with this story because I seem to side with Rav Safra, but because of Shtika Kohoda Dami, once he makes that statement, it seems like there is some deception there. The fact that they're letting him think that, even though it wasn't true, seems to be creating some indebtedness that is not true.
Okay, but the point that the Gemara is making is that Ihu de kamate anafshe, right? Let's say we can take even a more extreme example. All right, let's say I come into shul one Shabbos and I sit down next to a guy and he says to me, wow, I'm so flattered that you chose to come all the way over here to sit down next to me, right? So, I mean, that's absurd. That was an available seat. I chose to sit down because it was available, not because I was looking for you to sit down next to you. Now, do I have to clarify that? Because this guy has this inflated ego of himself and he thinks that everything, the world revolves, the stars, the sun and the moon all revolve around him and that everything that happens is because of him, So I'm not obligated to correct that person. if the scenario does not indicate what he thinks. Let him continue deluding himself. Why does his delusion obligate me to clarify the reality? That's essentially the attitude of the Gemara. It's one thing if I'm doing something that is misleading by its very appearance. But when I'm not doing anything that's objectively misleading, so then I'm not obligated to clarify someone else's delusion.
Yeah. I have the same, I struggle with a lot of this stuff in terms of, you know how the Rambam, I mean, you've talked about this before, how he talks about how does this impact your own midot? You know what I'm saying? In terms of your honesty and your, so, okay, he is deluding himself, but now that he has done that, for the love of emes, and to try to be a more honest person, in terms of your own midot, I think that's why maybe I like Rav Safra's approach more. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to.
No, I do. You want to be squeaky clean. In other words, you want to make sure that your interactions with people are always honest, right? You don't want to leave people with a false impression, even if they've created it in their own mind.
Exactly.
And I suppose that would be lifnim mishura sadin. But remember that Rava was actually critical of Rav Safra. Rava says, look, Mar Zutra is someone who we respect. So why did you make him feel bad? And he deluded himself. We didn't do anything inherently that was supposed to look wrong. I just want to accentuate that. If you take a look at Tosfos over here, he says, V'hakamatin lei. He says, Rav Safra said, why shouldn't I have told him? After all, weren't we deceiving him? V'im tomar, v'ha'en zetos, kevin de belav hachi hayu boim lichvodo, kide amar lei tfei hava tarchana. He says, 1 second, there is no deception here. They're not doing anything that's deceptive, because didn't Rav Safra say in the same breath? He says, to be honest with you, Rebbe, we weren't coming to greet you, but had we known that you were coming, we would have gone out even farther to go and greet you. So that indicates that they weren't doing anything deceptive by traveling on the road, because at the end of the day, if Mar Zutra would have sent them a telegram letting them know that he's coming on that day to their town, they would have been happy to go out to greet him. So even according to Rav Safra's own argument, it's not true. They're not doing anything deceptive. Like we said before on the previous page, in the case of the opening of the barrel, that Rav Yehuda opened up a new barrel for Ula, even though he had to do it anyway. And the Gemara there had said that in a scenario where you have to do it anyway, but you would have done it for Ula, because Ula is such a great dear friend, then you're not obligated to disclose to him. So why is that any different from here? So Tosfos says, why is it over here that it's Rav Safra considers it an act of deception, whereas in the previous case, the Gemara says it's perfectly justifiable, with the case of the barrel, that Ula comes over, Rav Yehuda had to open the new barrel anyway, but the reason why he didn't have to disclose it to Ula is because even if he didn't have to open the new barrel, he would have opened it for Ula. And that's why he didn't have to disclose. So over here too, they would have gone out to greet Mar Zutra. So what's the big deal? Why was Rav Safra thinking that he needed to disclose this? The Shlomar delo dami klal. So Tosfos says it's not totally analogous. He says the le'el nihi deleka pseida kolkach b'mesha poschan kevin shahayu mechuras lechen vani. So he says like this: it's true that Rav Yehuda had to open the barrel anyway for a reseller that was coming to pick up most of the barrel, but mikol makom ba'avuro paschan. But at the end of the day, the reason why Rav Yehuda was opening the barrel at that particular moment was because he wanted to honor Ula. Now, the fact is, he didn't have to open the new barrel then. He could have waited for 2 hours from that point, when the actual customers would have come to pick up the 3/4 of the barrel. But he said, you know what? I'm going to have to open this barrel anyway. Ula is such a dear friend. Let me open the barrel now for him. So he's actually opening the barrel a couple of hours early. He is doing something differently from what he normally would have done had Ula not shown up. So that's the reason why he doesn't have to notify Ula that the customers are going to be coming anyway to pick up most of this barrel, because he would have opened it up for Ula anyway. And Lamaisa, he is doing something especially for Ula by opening it up early instead of opening it up when the customers come. The kaven da'afilu lo hayu mechuros hayaposchan ba'avuro lo hutzrach lahodio klal. And therefore, couple that fact that he is doing something specifically, especially for Ula, and the fact that even if the customers weren't coming to pick up most of the barrel, he would have opened a new barrel anyway for Ula, then that's the reason why he doesn't have to notify Ula of that fact that later on, most of the barrel is going to be sold anyway. Aval hacha lo bo'u klal ba'avuro. But in the case over here, they weren't traveling on the road at all for the sake of Mar Zutra. There was no action involved in their being on that road that had anything to do with Mar Zutra. And that's why Rav Safra felt that it was important to notify Mar Zutra, even though we would have come out anyway to greet you. But the fact of the matter is, our presence here today has nothing to do with you, Mar Zutra, because we had no idea that you were coming. It's a very subtle distinction. In the previous case, it's true that I'm not losing any money by opening up the barrel for you, Ula. I would have been happy to lose money by opening the barrel for you, but it so happens that I have to do it anyway for the sake of my customers. The reason I don't have to disclose that to you is because I would have been happy to lose the money for you, even if I didn't have customers coming later today. And Lamaisa, I am doing something especially for you by opening it 2 hours earlier than my customers are coming. Okay? In this case, I'm not doing anything at all differently than what I would have done had you not been in the picture. And that's the reason Rav Safra was disturbed. But nonetheless, Rava told him, even in that scenario, there's no reason to disclose this to him, because there's nothing inherent in what you're doing that would indicate that you did this specifically for Mar Zutra. And so again, it's like two different madregas. It's if the act itself, most people would interpret it as doing a special favor for the guy, and you needed to do it anyway, so then you should disclose it to him. Okay, because with that, you're not doing it to do him a special favor, but you're doing something nice anyway, because you don't have to open the barrel for him. So therefore, you should tell him, don't think that I'm losing money by opening a new barrel just for you. Don't worry, the 80% of the barrels already sold to customers are coming in a couple of hours. There you should disclose. But if the act itself is not indicative of my doing a special favor for you, but you yourself decided that you're deluding yourself and decided that I did this for you, right? How often has it happened that you get off a plane in a foreign city and you see an old friend of yours in the airport, right? That happens all the time. You see a guy from your shul, you get off a plane, you're flying from Toronto to LaGuardia, and all of a sudden, in the Air Canada flight, that guy's waiting in the airport to fly from LaGuardia back to Toronto. And you see the guy, you daven with him every day, and he says, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you came to meet me at the airport." Of course I didn't come to meet you at the airport, you moron. I mean, I had to, just because I'm getting off the plane and you happen to be here, you think I came for you? That's ridiculous. Now, do I have to tell him that? No, I'm not mechuyev to tell him something that's patently absurd if he decided to create this false narrative in his own mind. That's the whole point that Rava was trying to say, right? Okay. Does that make you feel a little bit better? I'm not sure if that.
Oh, that was great. That Tosfos was really good. This reminds me of a little bit also of the Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel, Ketzad Merakdim Lifnei Hakala. In other words, let him delude himself and be happy. That would be maybe a Beis Hillel approach. And Beis Shammai would say, hold on a second, what about emes? We're just going to compromise emes by allowing that to happen. I don't know. They seem similar.
Yeah, in many instances, actually, we do have to compromise emes. Remember, we said that there are situations in order to make shalom between two parties, you're supposed to lie. And in order to make shalom between ish v'ishto, to make him feel that he's gotten the most beautiful bride in the world, sometimes emes does have to be sacrificed. But remember also over there, as the Meforshim say, by saying kala noa v'chasuda, you're not suggesting that she's a supermodel when she's a grotesque, when she's a monstrosity, right? But what you are suggesting is that for every chasan, there's a beautiful kala, meaning that beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, right? So there's a certain, even for Beis Hillel, it's not a distortion of truth, because you're saying she's pleasant, a chasuda, she's got some kind of exceptional quality about her. Everyone is exceptional in some way, right? Anyway, we'll have to hold it for here today, and have a wonderful day, everybody.